Have you ever thought about American history not as some straight line, but more like a chain reaction? A huge problem pops up, we scramble to find a solution, and guess what? That solution creates the next big problem. That's kind of what we're digging into today, the story of America's unfinished business.
So, where do we start? Well, let's jump right into 1865. The Civil War is finally over, the guns are silent, but the country is just shattered. It's in pieces. And that brings us to the first massive question, one that's going to shape everything to come. Okay, so on one hand, the Union won. Slavery is officially over. That's huge. But victory left behind a country that was basically a smoking ruin. You've got millions of newly freed African Americans, a South that's bitter and completely devastated. The first job, the monumental job, was just figuring out how to put it all back together again.
And that effort? Well, that brings us to our first major chapter, Reconstruction. This was America's first shot, and let me tell you, it was a messy one, at answering that giant question of not just how to rebuild, but what freedom was actually going to mean now. Now, the solution they came up with, at least on paper, it was revolutionary. We're talking 3 brand new amendments to the Constitution. The 13th, abolished slavery. Done. The 14th, granted citizenship. The 15th gave black men the right to vote. This wasn't just a tweak. It was a radical, fundamental reimagining of who got to be an American.
But, and this is a huge but, that new foundation was attacked, immediately. Southern states came up with all these laws, these black codes, and new economic systems like sharecropping, basically designed to trap people. You had violent groups like the KKK using pure terror to stop people from exercising their rights. And then, the final nail in the coffin, really, was the Supreme Court's separate but equal ruling. So that promise of equality, it was left as some very, very unfinished business.
So with Reconstruction pretty much abandoned, the country pivots. It turns to a totally different solution for its problems. Just make money. Lots of it. The new answer to everything was explosive economic growth. This is what we call the Gilded Age. And for good reason. It covered everything in a thin layer of gold, but underneath, oh man, a whole new set of dark problems was brewing.
And this period is just full of contradictions. I mean, look at the big titans of the era. Guys like Andrew Carnegie, John D. Rockefeller. To some people, they were heroic captains of industry, geniuses building the modern world. But to a whole lot of other people, they were robber barons, ruthless guys who crushed anyone in their way and got rich off the backs of their workers. And the craziest part? Both of those things were kinda true at the same time. And this is the cost of all that so-called progress. For millions of ordinary people, the Gilded Age wasn't golden at all. It meant crazy low pay, incredibly dangerous jobs, kids working in factories, people crammed into disgusting tenements. It's no surprise that labor unions started popping up, leading to some really violent strikes. And on top of all that, political corruption was just out of control. Think of guys like Boss Tweed in New York. That shiny, gilded surface, it was hiding a totally rotten core. Eventually, that shiny surface just couldn't hide the rot anymore. People knew things were broken. So the next era becomes this fascinating two-front battle. On one side, you have this huge push to fix all the problems at home. And on the other, America starts flexing its muscles on the world stage for the first time. And things changed fast. Just look at this timeline. It starts with farmers demanding a fair shake, the populist movement. Then that energy moves to the cities with the progressives trying to fight corruption. But at the exact same time, a quick war with Spain suddenly makes the U.S. an imperial power. And then, boom, a few years later, America gets dragged into World War I and becomes a major global player. It was a dizzying, head-spinning transformation. The really big idea driving all this change was this new belief that, hey, maybe the government should actually do something to fix these problems. You had journalists, they called them muckrakers, exposing all the grime. You had regular citizens demanding action. And you had presidents, like the larger-than-life Teddy Roosevelt, who actually listened. He started using the power of the government to bust up giant monopolies and promised everyone a square deal. So this new solution, a more active government, a bigger role in the world, it sets the stage for what might be the most volatile period yet. We're talking about a wild roller coaster ride, an unbelievable economic boom, followed by the most devastating crash in history, and then another world war, one that would change America's place in the world forever. Right, so after the massive party that was the Roaring '20s, the hangover was brutal.
The stock market crashes in 1929, and the whole economy just falls off a cliff. This one number really says it all. 25%. 1 out of every 4 working adults in America was out of a job. It was an absolute catastrophe, on a scale that's hard to even imagine. And this crisis forces a huge debate. What is the government supposed to do? President Hoover's take was basically, let's not interfere, it'll fix itself. It did not fix itself, so his successor, Franklin D. Roosevelt, or FDR, comes in and does the complete opposite. He promises a New Deal and launches this massive alphabet soup of government programs, the CCC, the WPA, Social Security, all designed to put people to work and create a safety net. This completely changed how Americans thought about their government. But you know what really, truly ended the Great Depression? World War II. The country mobilized on a scale nobody had ever seen. Factories went from making cars to making tanks, seemingly overnight. And when the war was over, America didn't just go back to hiding within its borders. Nope. It stepped up, helped create the United Nations, and came out of the smoke as the undisputed, most powerful nation on the planet. Okay, but being a superpower, well, that creates its own set of huge, complicated problems. The next chapter in our story is really about 2 massive battles happening at the exact same time. You've got this global chess match against the Soviet Union and communism, and, at home, a powerful, painful, and long overdue struggle for basic freedom and equality. And for decades, American foreign policy was driven by this one simple idea, the domino theory. The belief was that if just one country fell to communism, all its neighbors would topple right after, just like a row of dominoes. And that fear, that one theory, is what led the U.S. to jump into conflicts all over the world, from Korea all the way to Vietnam. Which brings us to the massive, glaring contradiction of the whole era, right? Here's the United States out there on the world stage, painting itself as the great defender of freedom and democracy, while back home, millions of its own citizens were being denied their most basic rights simply because of the color of their skin. So something had to give, and it did. The fight for freedom at home absolutely exploded. We see it move from the courtrooms with cases like Brown v. Board to the streets with boycotts and marches, all the way to the halls of Congress. And all that pressure from civil rights activists, it finally led to huge landmark laws that started to, at long last, address that unfinished business from all the way back in Reconstruction. And right in the middle of all this came Vietnam. What started as an attempt to stop those dominoes from falling spiraled into this long, brutal, and incredibly divisive war. There was this one moment, the Tet Offensive, where it became clear to everyone back home that the government wasn't telling them the truth about the war. And just like that, trust in the government collapsed. The country was fractured by protests. In the end, the U.S. pulled out, and the war ended in failure, leaving these deep, deep scars on the American psyche. So after the trauma of Vietnam, and then eventually the end of the Cold War itself, America finds itself in another identity crisis. The big enemy is gone. So now what? What does it even mean to be the world's only superpower? And what are you supposed to do with all that power? Man, the end of the 20th century was just a whirlwind. The Cold War is won, the Berlin Wall falls. America steps into this role as a kind of world protector, like in the first Gulf War. Then we have the 90s with a huge economic boom and the rise of the internet connecting everybody. But then comes this terrible shock, the Oklahoma City bombing, proving that horrifying new threats could come from right here at home. So the country is trying to figure all this out, right? It's navigating this new role, finding its footing in a world that doesn't have that one big clear enemy anymore. And then, on a perfectly clear September morning, everything just changes. The 9/11 attacks plunged the nation headfirst into the war on terror. This was a totally new kind of conflict against a new kind of enemy that didn't have a country or an army. It led to long wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and this massive buildup of security and surveillance back home. And really, it's the latest chapter in this long story we've been telling, this chain of problems and solutions, which leaves us with the most recent piece of America's unfinished business and the question we're still wrestling with today. In that all-out effort to make itself safer, did America actually succeed? Or did it just become a fundamentally different country in the process?